A loaded press conference. Rhule had a lot to say. Players, all right, things to react to. We're going to start right off the top. Basically, Matt Rhule said, he said it. Dylan Raiola is not going to be a great quarterback at 240 pounds. Dylan knows that. Dylan's working on it. Okay. Do we have any idea what he currently weighs, Jake?
Yeah, I was going to look at his. I don't even know what his last listing was last year.
All right, look that up real quick. Let me know. And I mean, take any height and weight, especially weight that you see listed online with a gigantic grain of salt.
So he's listed at 230 on ESPN at least. I can double check and make sure Huskers.com is the same.
So for me, I think and you got the clip. Maybe I should just have you play the clip. Let me know what Huskers.com says real quick, then we'll play the clip. For me, he needs to be a little bit quicker, a little bit more nimble. He needs to just work on his feet as a quarterback in general, which is not a surprising thing for a young quarterback. Okay. My biggest things coming into the offseason were his feet, getting a little bit trimmer, working on the deep ball. The deep ball, we know he can throw. It didn't go great last year. There wasn't a whole lot of time to throw. There wasn't guys open. And it was a lot of short to intermediate, quick, and screen passes. But that's something we got to get back to being able to take advantage of the deep ball, his big arm. We got speed at wide receiver now. We got to be able to protect him, give him the time to get the ball off. He's got to make the reads quicker. Okay, Holgorsen tried to help him by simplifying the amount of reads, and he played better as soon as that happened, at least to a degree. All right, but part of that is being a little bit slimmer and trimmer as well. It allows you to move quicker. It allows you to take off faster. It allows you – I don't know that a quarterback needs great endurance, okay, but there's something to be said for, hey, that guy's supposed to be the leader of the offense. Some people see him as the leader of the team. Well, if you're going to be in that position, people should be able to look at you and be like, that guy's the way he should be. He should be in very, very good shape. So for me, it's about being a leader as well. But go ahead and play that clip there, Jake. What did Huskers.com say real quick?
They did have him at 230 as well.
Okay, go ahead and play that clip.
You know, if you go back and look at Dylan's year, I mean, as a freshman, I think he did a lot of things that were not a lot of freshmen do. I think he was really up there in terms of passing percentage and all those different things. And then there's things I know as a freshman he would love to improve upon. So he's going into year 2 now. Last year, as a highly recruited freshman, I think at this time you saw him trying to, keep his voice quiet and just earn everyone's respect. I think now, he has to step up and lead when able. He's really working on his body composition. He won't be a great quarterback at 240 pounds, right? So getting his body composition to one where he can be fleet of foot, where he can slide nimbly and move within the pocket, where he can convert third downs with his feet. I think that's something that we're all bought into and he has to continue to do. So there's things he needs to work on. But also, just another year in the system, another year of understanding what a mat drill looks like, what an off-season workout looks like, what meetings look like. I think all players make a great jump from year 1 to year 2, and then probably from year 2 to year 3. The thing we're trying to avoid with all of our freshmen is a lot of times guys have some success as a freshman, and then they kind of tail off, and all of a sudden it takes till year 3, and you got to get them back going again. And whether it's Jacory or V9 or Willis or any of those guys who played as a true freshman, making sure that doesn't happen. And Dylan's certainly one we can't allow that to happen with. And so, Dana will, I'm sure, push him in every respect. Glenn does a great job with him on the day-to-day. And I think you just see a lot of consistency on that side of the ball.
What's your takeaway from that, Jake?
Well, I think there's a lot of good, information in there and kind of opened it up to the rest of the freshmen. But obviously it does kind of stand out to this, sometimes coaches, they'll tell you something, face to face. And you might think, okay, well, throwing out that number, that 240, pound number might be something. But sometimes you got to, it helps to bring it to public. Like, hey, everybody be on this. We've told them, we're actively telling them. I think Rhule does that a lot. I think he conversates with people and lets people know what's going on behind closed doors. But as you've seen on his kind of media circuit, he said before, he's fortunate enough to be in the position that he is, that he just kind of says whatever comes to his mind, or, obviously he goes through it, but, maybe says more than the average coach would. And I don't know if you would hear that from, just any coach, but I think it's kind of a little bit putting, kind of the public and everybody on the same level, that they know that they're trying to thin Dylan Raiola down a bit.
It's a very open and honest approach. It's one of the things I like about him. I think it's like when I'll go on YouTube and I'm constantly listening to sports shows and football shows, and I'm constantly trying to learn and what's going on out there. Like when I talk about what's coming up next in college football and what to expect here and what to expect there, it's because I've heard it 3 or 4 different places from people that I trust. And there aren't many head coaches across America that I see in headlines as much as Matt Rhule from national shows. Now, maybe that's just because I tend to look up Nebraska things, so Nebraska sites tend to pop up more, or things with Nebraska names attached to them tend to pop up due to the algorithm. I don't know. But it doesn't matter if I'm on my laptop, my phone, my wife's laptop. It's Matt Rhule is the one coach that tends to come up the most, which is interesting because we were 7-6 last year. You would think it would be, a guy like Dabo Swinney's in the news a lot. He's another guy who's out there, but you would think it would be like coaches in the national championship, or Ryan Day's out there a lot, just won a national title. But for me, like, he's out there a lot, and I think it's because he tends to be ahead of the curve because he doesn't care what other people are doing. He cares about doing what he believes is best, not what's popular. I think he's not interested in too many things other than doing what's best for the program, and he doesn't mind being honest about it. Like, this needs to happen, that needs to happen. Like, he's a guy, when he's holding the mirror, he'll turn it around so it faces himself, and he'll talk about it. And then he'll be like, hey, you need to work on this, you need to work on that. And it's not in a negative way, it's just very honest. I actually like it and appreciate it. Sometimes I'm like, man, I wonder if it comes back to bite him in the butt sometimes, but it only bites you in the butt if it bothers you. I don't think it bothers him. I think it's just who he is. Like, he's openly talked about, hey, when you're on the sidelines at Carolina and the fans are in your family, your wife, your kids are in the stands, and everybody in the stands seems to be chanting, fire Coach Rhule, fire Matt Rhule. And he's talked about how Christian McCaffrey came over and put his arm around him at that point in time. So I think for him, that really helped him develop thick skin and a little bit of, hey, if I can survive this, I can survive anything. And I've got the ability to go through anything and endure to the end. And I know who I am, and I know what I want to be, and I'm okay with that, and I'm okay with being out there out front and honest. Now, as far as Dylan, he talked about his completion percentage. He completed 67.1% of his passes. That's very, very good in general, especially for a true freshman quarterback. I also talked about the lack of deep ball. So it's kind of like when Cam Ward is making fun of Shedeur Sanders for all the checkdowns. Oh, you're going to get this completion percentage award because of your last name, because of all the checkdowns. That's what Cam Ward on the clip, some of the clips that we played here on this very show, was giving Shedeur a hard time. Okay. You could argue that with Dylan just a little bit, but at the same time, for a true freshman, that's still pretty good. What I want to see change, I want to see the touchdown to interception ratio. I don't want to see 13 touchdowns, 11 interceptions next year. I want to see at least 2-1, preferably 3-1, if you're going to be one of the top 5 quarterbacks in the Big Ten, which I think is fair to ask for with the weapons around him, that experience, the offensive coordinator he's working with. As far as the weight itself, I'm just going to be blunt. There's no excuse to be 240. I don't know what he weighs right now. And I don't know that I trust what's on the sites. Rhule threw out 240 for a reason. How about this? He didn't throw out 280 or 210. He threw out 240 for a reason. So at some point, Dylan was 240 and or is 240. There's no reason to be 240. All right, just like when I stepped on the scale June 1st, and that thing said 303, I was like, that's not acceptable. I looked in the mirror and I said, that's not acceptable either. I'll go ahead and put my shirt back on and not look in the mirror for a while. That's what I did. And I sit here 275 today, and I've got 5 more pounds to go to reach my goal. There's been ups and downs and frustrations. And from time to time on here, I'll talk about how much of a jerk that scale's been to me, or it's been nice to me today. But at the end of the day, it comes back to me. If I want to get to 270, by God, that's on me. So it's on Dylan. From everything you hear, he's putting in the work. Putting on weight is harder for some people than others. Losing weight is harder for some people than others. What I'm going to say is, if you're 20 years old, which he now is, and you're asked to lose, I think 220 is the perfect weight for him. Okay. If you're asked to lose 20 pounds and you've got everything at your fingertips and your disposal, there's no excuse not to be 220 by spring. I don't know what he weighs now, or at the latest by when fall camp rolls around, last week of July, first part of August. Any thoughts there, Jake, before we move on?
Yeah, I agree with you. I mean, we'll wait and see. It's something that I don't know if you would call it a concern, but it's something that would be interesting to kind of track moving forward. And like you said, there's things that they can, obviously pocket awareness and sliding. I mean, especially sliding. These were kind of big deals last year. And so, to take that next step, he's got everything in the world that's going to help him over there at the university to get to the ideal playing weight. So it's a story that I think worth tracking a little bit now that we're talking about it, even going into spring.
And again, I'm going to come back to if I'm another player on that team. I always said, I don't care who you are when you walk through the doors, what you do once you're in the building. In other words, I didn't care if you were a 5-star, number 2 running back in the country, because I saw that guy walk in. He was a great dude. And I've also watched a walk-on walk in. They had no business being in the building physically. Turned out to be one of the 3 captains with me and Zach my senior year, Brandon Rigoni, one of the guys I respect the absolute most of anybody I've ever met in my life. I've also watched those 2 do Oklahoma drill versus each other, by the way. I don't care who you are when you walk through the door. It's what you do once you're in the building. If I'm a teammate of Dylan's, I'm like, hey, 5-star recruit, legacy player, starts as a true freshman. That's all wonderful. Okay? Are you getting slim and trim? Are you doing your part? Hey, you're out in front and center the entire offseason. Okay, I've talked about that. But you're in the weight room at 6 a.m., according to D. Shorts, the wide receiver coach. I like that. I'm okay with you doing this as long as you're also doing that. And if you're doing that, I don't mind if you're doing this in the public eye. But if you're in the public eye, but you're not doing these other things, I'm not following you. It seems to me like Dylan is doing both. And if that's the case, and we win football games, I got 0 problems with it. All right. Let's see. Matt Rhule. I'm Pat Stewart as GM. With this new era of college football, you really need really smart people. Shares that Stewart has been a part of Super Bowl teams and is really adaptable. Rhule shares that he thinks things are actually working in the right direction. Coaching staffs in college football are looking more and more like an NFL model. And I quote, we are certainly farther along than we ever have been. I talked about this earlier, but the team looks bigger, faster, and stronger. And good news, there is not one player that isn't doing a good job, end quote. Talks about there's a ton of competition, which is what we want. Something about Dana is that he is a unifying force. So talks about, hey, we look different. Hey, that's good to hear. I like hearing that. I'm not going to lie. When I read that, I was like, I've seen that before. It's not the first time I've heard a coach say that. Is it the first time you've heard a coach say that? Or even close?
Sorry, I got blind. I wasn't listening. Sorry.
No, that's okay. He talks about how we look different. We look bigger, faster, stronger.
Okay, yeah.
I want to hear that.
Yeah.
I expect to hear it, especially with who we brought in. And I think Corey Campbell's a great strength coach. So I'm not surprised to hear it. It's just, it's also not the first time I've heard a coach say that.
Oh, yeah.
Does that make sense?
Absolutely, yeah.
How much stock do you put into that? I'm not saying he's lying in any way, shape, or form, but I also don't know that those other coaches were lying. But at some point, I got to see it play out with pads on.
I've never seen a coach say, we look a little weaker, a little slower.
Yeah, we're bigger, fatter, slower.
There's a lot of stuff I honestly, just over the years, it's just kind of turns into coach speak that, you know, it is something to put in a headline and get excited about, but yeah, I'm not gonna be, oh, they are? Well, now I think they're gonna win 10 games rather than 8.
Oh man. So it's true. I believe him and I believe that it's true, but to your point, what else is he supposed to say? You know what I mean? The thing out of all that stuck out to me was Dana being a unifying force, and there's competition. Competition is what you need. Competition to earn a spot, competition to keep a spot, competition to be on the field as much as you can be. Hey, if you're a D-end, that's great. Are you just a nickel D-end? Are you just a pass rushing D-end? Or are you a 3-down D-end? There's a difference. Like getting on the field and staying on the field are 2 different things as well. So I love that he brings up competition. All right. Rhule shares that last spring they were focused on adding competition. This spring will be about execution and excelling in situational football. You know what that translates to? The little things. Snapping, handing the ball off, not having the guy going in motion, getting the ball snapped into him, pump protection, field goal protection. It's not very often we've just outright been out-talented or outsized. We have been out-physical and we've been out-footballed when we've lost. Now, to be clear, I've sat here and talked about how Nebraska has talent, has size, et cetera, et cetera. I'm not saying we're a top 5 talent roster as we sit here in America. I'm not saying that. I'm also not saying we can't compete with an Ohio State because we've shown we can just a year ago. But like you look at Georgia, you look at Bama talent-wise, you look at Ohio State, you look at Texas, you look at those schools. They're ahead of us right now. They are. I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is we are top 20. And we're losing to teams that aren't top 30. That's coaching and that's little things. And so that's the biggest thing I want to see this offseason. Get better at football. The parts that make up football, the little things. I believe our roster is the best it's been. Rhule shares they wanted Jalen Gramstad to come back. Really likes the way he and Dylan work and train together. You know, I mean, people obviously reported he was coming back, but not much was made of it. I'm like, why would you bring back him for another year unless you specifically wanted? There's a reason he's back. And, when I chatted with Roy, one of the things I asked him, I said, hey, we've got one proven running back. Quentin Ives, Matt Rhule likes, and we got some talented freshmen, other guys in that room, but nobody proven, nobody with real experience. Is that concerning to you? He said no. He said no because a veteran can lead a young guy and help speed up the process of them learning. And he's like, as long as the young guy's willing to listen and learn, and the veteran's willing to lead and take on that leadership role and help a younger guy and not just feel threatened by him, which can be a very real thing. He said he wasn't uber concerned. And so Jalen Gromstad is not going to start over Dylan, but he's a guy that has what Dylan doesn't, which is a ton of football experience. He wants to be a coach one day. Very smart. So I could see that pairing off the field. Plus, Jalen was the backup going into the bowl game. I mean, he might get his chance at some point. Who knows? And keep in mind how good he was at the NAIA level. Very good player. But off the field, he can help make Dylan better while also providing depth. I don't feel like that's been talked about hardly at all this offseason. I just did an appearance, and like Luke Lindenmeyer, Carter Nelson, Jalen were there. And man, they're just good dudes. It's hard not to like them in general. So maybe that sways me a little bit. But even before, I hadn't met Jalen before. This was only like 2 weeks ago. I still felt that same way. All right, it says practices will look different this year due to the 105 roster limit. The only thing that will change about spring ball is no spring game. Will be a good physical hard-nosed spring. All right, they are past the point of potential. It's about production now. So he talked about, as they're filling out this 105 and deciding who's going to be it and the depth chart, who's going to be on the roster and where you're going to be on the depth chart. It can't be about potential, what you can do. It has to be about what you're going to do right now. And I think part of that is the best players should play immediately. But I also think that a part of that is you can't tell me Rhule's not feeling a little bit of heat. He's got a 9-year, millions of dollars worth of a deal. But you can't tell me he's not feeling a little bit of heat. Like, there's got to be a performance level now. I think that's part of it. You got any thoughts on that, Jake?
No, I absolutely agree. I mean, a lot of this stuff that's kind of coming out just feels like year 3, right? It feels like the expectations of Matt Rhule winning at Nebraska are arriving. And so he's got to have his best roster prepared. They got to make sure everything's ironed out and ready to go. But it is, I mean, they're going away from, some of the stuff they were doing last year, maybe more as development, kind of a developmental program. And now they're here. They got to win. So it does really feel like a shift toward we'll get there to we're here. Let's start getting this thing going.
All right. Rhule says he knows he will keep taking a lot of heat for scheduling decisions. However, he acknowledges that it all comes down to making smart financial decisions. And that's what I've been talking about. He's going to do what he believes is best, maybe not necessarily what is popular. And as a coach, that's got to be one of the hardest things to do. He has to sit here for months and take heat for this. Him and Troy. The only time you get the payoff is when you get to like 8, 9, 10 wins. And then nobody cares. And you're in that college football playoff conversation. Or you're going to, the bowl game last year was awesome, but you're going to an even better bowl game if that's the case this upcoming year. Then all of a sudden, everybody's like, man, that was a genius decision. But for 6 months, you got to sit here. You got to take the bullets. That's what he's saying. And he's willing to do it. And I quote, if every decision is popular, you're not going to make the right decision. End quote. I've got to repeat that again. If every decision is popular, you're not going to make the right decision. I feel like I should read that to parents. Like, oh my God, if I did everything my kids wanted, they'd be eating cake, breakfast, lunch, and dinner. They'd play video games 25 hours a day. They'd never go to school. And what would their adulthood look like? Like, it's the same thing for a football coach. It's not always about what's popular. You got to do what you feel is best. I like that quote a lot. Wants all the sports at Nebraska to get the services that the department offers, not just the football team. Here we go. Thoughts on all players at the combine. And I quote, we were proud to have 4 guys there. I was really proud of Ty. End quote. He said having Ty on the team was like a cheat code. People didn't appreciate just how good Ty Robinson really was. Scouts shared with Rhule how well Ty did in his interviews beyond what he displayed on the field. The investment they have made in player development is paying off when you see the guys at the combine. Was proven in the way Ty, Isaiah, Naor, and Thomas Fidoni ran. Cam Jurgens, Ty, Thomas, and more are all training here at Nebraska. Not going to coaches all over the country. I do think that means something. Ty and Thomas in particular getting ready for the NFL draft. Now, I will say this. I don't know if they were training for the combine here at Nebraska, because that would mean even more, because a lot of guys will go somewhere, train specifically for the combine, which, by the way, is not like training for football at all. You're training for a track meet. It's completely different. It's once the combine is over, I looked at it as a complete waste of time. I felt like I got worse at football and I had to come back and train for football. Topic for another day. But if Ty and Thomas Fidone were training there to begin with up to the combine, that means a lot. But even if they're training now, because I came back and trained at Nebraska after I had spent 2 or 3 months in Texas training for the combine. So I don't know which exactly that is, but it is always good when you have former players coming back. All right, 2 NFL teams tried, as I mentioned earlier on the show, to poach strength and conditioning coach Corey Campbell, who I do believe is doing a good job. All the coaches Rhule respects told him to hire Terry Braden, which is why he brought him in. Obviously a very good hire as well as a defensive line coach. Is really excited about having Coach Simpson back. Thinks guys on the D-line are ready. That's a line I'm going to repeat again. Thinks guys on the D-line are ready. What's your reaction to that? We have all these inexperienced guys. Only one guy who's ever started a game in his entire collegiate career. Hardly any guys who played a large amount of downs at all in their collegiate career. They haven't even practiced a snap in spring practice yet. Oh, I like everything he said. I have a hard time with this one. He thinks they're ready. We haven't even had a spring practice yet. How can he know that, Jake?
Yeah, I mean, that might be tough, but I mean, again, it might be some of the names that you do kind of think in there. I know defensive line's a big question, and we're going to see where these guys go. But, just from the start of it, I have a pretty high level of confidence in a Cam Linhart or a Riley Van Poppel. So, maybe it's just kind of the offseason progress that you've made. But, I mean, I agree with you. It's one of those things that, like, again, if he says it, that's good. But we're going to have to wait and see on that because, like you said, I mean, he might have to wait and see on that. That might be something by the end of the week. He said, by the end of the first week of spring, he might think, well, maybe I said that a little too quickly.
When I look at this team, we've talked about it a bunch. Love the skill positions on offense. Love the interior offensive line, quarterback, running back, tight end room. Got to feel good about all that. I mean, Gunnar Kurtula stepped in more than admirably with injuries that enabled him or forced him, however you want to look at it, to start as a freshman. He came and stepped in admirably. Okay, you look at Elijah Pritchett, through the roof talent. Not through the roof consistency at all yet. So tackle's a bit of a question mark. Now, those guys might both end up being first-team all-conference performers next year because I look at them both and I see Sunday-type talent. But I thought Gunnar probably played better than Elijah did last year down at Alabama, with Gunnar being thrust into starting to left tackle, but he's got areas he needs to improve. Athleticism is great, got to be a little bit more powerful, strong and sturdy, explosive at the point of contact. But that's really my question mark is the offensive tackle and the offensive tackle depth. And defensively, it's the D-line. Now, 2 years ago, you remember the question mark on defense 2 years ago? You remember what it was, Jake? Going into Rhule's first season, what was it?
Rhule's first season.
On defense, the biggest question mark, biggest position group of question mark. That was a question mark on defense.
Was it D-line?
It was the D-line.
Yeah.
And it ended up being the strength of the team. So I'm like, how do you know they're ready? They haven't even put on a helmet and not shoulder pads and just a jersey yet for that first practice. So I'm not saying they can't be good. They won't be good. When I look at the team, I have 3 big question marks: offensive tackle, defensive line, and the frickin' little things. Those are my big question marks. They could all, at the end of the season, we could grade all those A pluses. They could be Bs, they could be whatever. We'll see. All right. Rhule talked about how he almost didn't want to hire Eckler because of the former players that were saying you should hire Eckler, and the guys in the media were saying you should hire Eckler. He didn't want to deal with like a celebrity coach. This guy does not care what people say. He almost didn't hire Mike Eckler because of what people were saying and we wanted him. And then he was like, he's too good. How do you not hire him? Basically is what he said. I'm paraphrasing. But Eckler, all right, he is one of the best teachers. That's a quote. And I quote, he is one of the best teachers, end quote. Eckler and Snow are 2 really good evaluators. All right. Is the next clip, is it a Matt Rhule clip?
Yeah.
Go ahead and play it.
All right, here's Matt Rhule talking about the plan for the offensive line.
I think he's been, we've been rotating both at left guard because he's had success there in the center. We have a lot of guys, that we're excited to see play this spring. Sam Sledge, Jason, Mashake Shock, all those guys. I mean, they're all going to have an opportunity. Grant Bricks, Preston, many, many more. Tyler Knox healthy, coming back from being injured at the end of the year, healthier. So they've all waited their turn. And while there's been some obviously big portal moves. For the most part, when you look at college football, people are building their offensive line still through recruiting. And so it's, I think people sometimes expect, I think players expect, well, I'm a big recruit, I'm going to come in right away. And the old model of, as an offensive lineman, basically to come in and redshirt the first year, be a backup the second year, your redshirt freshman year, and hopefully contribute and start as a third-year player. That's the model. That's the model of having a successful team. And so some of those guys are in their third year, they're in their second year. I think they're right on track. So we have brought 2 guys in, they're older to help, but we have a bunch of guys we feel good about. And if we can get Turner, Teddy back, that will certainly bolster us as well.
So here's some of the names that are in the mix. I'm going to start with the interior offensive line because that's where I feel better at the moment. Justin Evans-Jenkins, Henry Lutovsky, Rocco Spindler, all got a bunch of starting experience. All right. Don't forget about a guy like Sam Sledge, who's up there as well. Highly touted young freshman, Grant Bricks, Preston Tamua. And he mentioned a lot of other guys. Now, depending on where you look, okay, you actually see Grant Bricks listed as a tackle. You see some of these guys as a tackle, some of them as a guard, whether it's Teddy Prohaska, Turner Corcoran, they could be moved around. On the interior, I still feel pretty good about the center guard situation. When you look at the tackle situation, you got Gunner, you got Henry Lutovsky, you got a lot of these other guys that he mentioned in that clip as well. And again, depending on where you look, Grant is listed as a guard. He's listed as a tackle, talking about Grant Bricks. You've got guys who can provide competition, who actually earns the job. You got guys with experience. You've got some talented guys as far as recruiting rankings, if you want to, depending on how much weight you want to put on those. When you look at the offensive line, there's things to feel good about, especially on the interior. I look at that tackle spot and I need to see consistency along with the ability and talent that I do see. You got any thoughts there, Jake?
Yeah, it's interesting. So, that especially the what he opened up was talking about Justin Evans at potentially guard or center. I think a lot of us kind of just thought, okay, well, he'll move into center from this position, but they like what he's done at guard. So, that's interesting. And then, you just like the fact that he's acknowledging that some of these younger players are names that we've talked about and were big recruits. It's time to see them show off. And I think that's kind of being the big question. You can have your different opinions on Coach Raiola and his offensive line at this point. I think a lot of people feel like it's gotten better, but how much? But the real question is, he was doing that a lot with the Turner Corcorans and the Ben Harts, the guys that have kind of been around. Can you develop underneath those guys once they're ready to move on? And now that Ben Hart's gone, and I think Corcoran, Prohaska are probably if you get something from them, it's good. If you don't, you're not necessarily banking on it so much. So it's time for those younger guys to step up and play and show what they've got. And again, there are certain guys that you might have questions about because they haven't seen them play. But I thought Brock Knudsen Gunnar Katula, who's out this spring. But I thought that he filled in, admirably enough that we weren't complaining about him too much.
Yep, I would agree with that. Was 18 guys out this spring? I think I saw earlier. There's a lot of guys out this spring. You talk about Turner and Teddy, Turner Corcoran, Teddy Prohaska, just coming off so many knee injuries and surgeries, especially with Teddy coming off of 3 of them. I'm not counting them out. I just realized while he may contribute, you don't want to sit here and count on it. You just want to see what happens, what unfolds, how these competitions end up unfolding over time. All right, let's see here. Rocco Spindler was next at the mic. Feels like this is the best place for him to not only get to the next level, but also to help this team. Now and I quote, "It is hard-nosed football here. The resources here from a medical standpoint speak for themselves," end quote. Rocco hasn't been here long, but he already speaks the language of this O-line room. Loves being coached by Donovan Raiola, and I quote, "He is straight to the point. There's no fluff. The quarterback here is phenomenal," end quote. Said he wants to be a part of this offense. Him and Dylan have sat down together to pick each other's brains. Said Dylan is a great friend, but he's an even better teammate. Says the guys here are tough as nails, not only to get through mat drills, but to attack it. need to be an O-line. This stood out to me. Need to be an O-line driven program. Let's repeat that again. Need to be an O-line driven program. This is year 4 under Donovan Raiola as the offensive line coach. He's been here longer than anybody. That includes Matt Rhule. This is year 3 for Rhule. All right. I'm gonna take something you said yesterday, and I'm gonna take out Dylan Raiola's name, even though his name belongs in there. But for the sake of this particular statement, I'm gonna take out his name and I'm gonna insert the offensive line. We need to start winning games because of the offensive line, not in spite of the offensive line. So I repeat that again.
Yeah.
We need to start winning games because of the offensive line, not in spite of the offensive line. All right. Dane Key next to the. Do you have anything on that real quick before we move on? You actually had a clip from Rocco, didn't you? I thought.
We have a quick clip. Matt Rhule talking about Rocco.
Okay, go ahead. Go ahead.
Spindler here.
First and foremost, he's a big, powerful man, right? So I mean, he's another guy out front who can move people. Who can accelerate his feet at the line of scrimmage, knock somebody back, slide his feet and pass pro. So it's just another good player, and he's really a great guy. He's a really good person. He fits the culture of that room. Sometimes you bring a guy in from a place that's had a lot of success and, they've got all the answers. And I think the thing that he's done is he's been great about just assimilating into our culture and adding value where he can. I think he'll be one of the, the leaders in that room. And there's a bunch of them. I think you see a guy like Justin Evans, who's really, with the older guys gone, now it's kind of his time. Some of those guys, Turner, Teddy, Henry, Gunner, they're all hurt, right, coming out of the season. So the guys that you have practicing full time, the Justins, those guys are really trying to accelerate kind of where we are. And I think Rocco's just jumped right in. Great guy to have, be around, very mature. And I'm excited to do some football with him.
So I love a lot of the things he said about Rocco. I mean, I'm not saying anything that Matt Rhule says isn't true, but I know they're specifically true. Rocco is a tough football player. He is a physical football player. He came from a team that just won a national championship. And according to Rhule, he's not walking in the door being like, I know everything. You can't coach me or touch me. No. He seems to be taking the opposite approach while also taking a leadership approach. And if you watch Notre Dame, I would love if Nebraska football was as tough as Notre Dame was last year. What Marcus Freeman has built at Notre Dame, I'm not going to lie, I'm jealous of it. They're not the most talented team in the country. They're probably top 20, maybe top 15. You want to be kind, top 10 maybe? And they just played for the national championship, and they were the second best team in the country. As much as I mocked and insulted them for losing to Northern Illinois, they played phenomenal football. And the true mark of a person isn't what happens to you. It's how you respond to what happens to you. And they responded in a phenomenal way. It's hard to build a culture nowadays. He's got a culture there. He's got a culture and a team that plays physical. I would love if Rocco would bring, while also being humble enough to be a positive leader, bring that to Nebraska. And I would love if Nebraska's physicality looked a lot similar to what I saw from Notre Dame last year. I went from mocking them to losing to Northern Illinois to predicting them before a single college football playoff game was played to predicting them to being in the national championship. You remember that?
Yeah.
That's how much respect I have for what Marcus Freeman has done there. And I would love to see Nebraska do some more things like that. I had a teammate in DC, and I loved him. He's a good dude. He was well-liked on the team when he joined. He played for the Giants. They won a Super Bowl championship. He signed as a big-time free agent, was a 4-3 nose guard, and was asked to come play 3-4 nose guard for us in DC. It is a different type of nose guard. It is not the same thing at all. No, I'm not talking about Albert Hainsworth. That story's for days right there with Albert Hainsworth. But this guy came in, and the one thing I couldn't stand about him, well, we won a Super Bowl and we did this. We won a Super Bowl and we did that. We won a Super Bowl and we did this, which was not what we were doing. It's a 3-4 defense. It's very different from the 4-3. I mean, his was an attacking, penetrating, up the field defense. And I played for Spagnuolo, who was his D coordinator. I know what that defense looks like, and I know what the defense in DC looked like. And while I keep in touch with this guy to this day, that's how much I liked him. But he would not shut up about, you guys are doing it the wrong way. This isn't the right way. It should be this. It should not be that. It drove me nuts. I'm like, dude, we're not a 4-3. We're not the Giants. We don't have Eli Manning. Like, this is what you're being asked to do. By the way, you're being paid a ton of money, which is why you came here as a free agent. How about you just listen to Jacob while he's screaming, Bernie, and why don't you just do what you're asked? As much as he never worked out as a 3-4 nose, physically he could do it. He just wouldn't buy in because he had all the answers before he walked in the door. So as much as I liked him as a person, I did not enjoy him as a teammate, and it didn't work out on the football field. It sounds like Rocco is the opposite of that from what we're being told, and I like that.